Good morning. We're here today specifically because horse racing is an international sport. Every year at this conference, I'm amazed and excited to see the numerous countries that are represented and to know that we're all working together towards a common goal to improve horse racing worldwide. The history of our sport is really pretty interesting, and it's not something most of us think about very often as we plan for the future. To set the stage for this morning's panel on international racing, I'd like to share some of its history, and as an American, I will focus a bit more on the U.S. because that's what I know. The sport of thoroughbred racing started in England. Although they had flat racing as early as 1174, the English classic races, such as the St. Leger, the Oaks, and the Derby, were established in the late 18th century. Thoroughbreds have been traveling internationally by ship for hundreds of years, and during the 18th and 19th centuries, the thoroughbred breed spread from England throughout the world, starting in North America with the stallion Bully Rock in 1730, and then into Australia, other parts of Europe, Japan, and South America during the 19th century. Soon, thoroughbreds were traveling for racing. Iroquois became the first American-bred winner of the Epsom Derby in 1881. The first foreign-born horse to win the Kentucky Derby was a colt sent from England, Omar Khayyam, which won the race in 1917, but many consider a match race to be the first international race of significance in the United States. It was in 1923 at Belmont Park when that year's Kentucky Derby winner, Zev, beat the English Derby winner, Papyrus. It was the first time a British horse was sent across the Atlantic for a single race. In response to Papyrus's travels, the French horse Epinard traveled to the United States in 1924 to run in a series of 3 races known as the International Specials at Belmont Park, Aqueduct, and Latonia Racetrack in Kentucky on the Cincinnati border. Epinard was owned by Pierre Wertheimer, whose descendants are still in racing today with farms in France and the United States. And although Epinard came in second in all 3 of those races, he was considered the U.S. champion older male horse. The door opened to ease this scale of travel more than 20 years after Epinard raced in America, starting in November of 1946 when 6 2-year-olds and 3-year-old colts were flown from Ireland to California in the first transatlantic flight for thoroughbreds. In 1947, the International Gold Cup, also known as the Empire City Gold Cup, was created to attract runners from Europe with a $100,000 purse at a mile and 5 furlongs. But the European horses stayed home. However, 2 South American-bred horses, Ensueño and Endeavor II, did make the trip, and the race was won by the great American Stymie. The inaugural DC International, held at Laurel Park in Laurel, Maryland, near Washington, D.C., in 1952, is considered by many to be the first truly international horse race, with horses traveling from England, Canada, Germany. And England won this one with a horse named Will Win. As Louis Romanet mentioned, his father Jean was one of the trailblazers who recognized the importance of harmonizing horse racing internationally and who knew that racing was more than an event. It was a cultural sharing. Not including our neighbors in Canada, Monsieur Romanet was also the first international participant at the U.S. Jockey Club's Roundtable Conference in 1974. That was 19 years before his creation of the IFHA in 1993, the same year as the first international simulcast conference. As Louis said so well in 2009 at our Roundtable Conference, and Kim Kelly restated this year at this year's conference, today's racing is truly borderless. Not only are the horses traveling worldwide for racing and breeding, but so too are the broadcasts and the betting dollars. Personally, I was working at the New Jersey Sports and Exposition Authority in 1985 when it first signed an international simulcasting agreement to broadcast its races, its thoroughbred races, to Caliente in Mexico. I also handled the first transatlantic simulcast to an American track. It was on a Tuesday morning at Monmouth Park in June of 1990, about 1,600 American fans arrived early to watch 3 simulcast races from England, the first of which began 2 hours before our live card. We showed 3 days of racing from Ascot that year, and I was very proud of the achievement. So proud that I framed the newspaper headline, and I still have it in my library at home. More recently, Japan began simulcasting major races in 2016, with the first race being the Prix de l'Arc de Triomphe. Racing fans in Japan wagered approximately US $40 million on the race that year, opening up many eyes, including lots of them in this room. And just 2 months ago, Sky Racing World made racing from Singapore available through simulcasting in the United States. With today's simulcasting abilities, equine stars on one side of the world could become heroes in countries where they never stepped foot. Take the remarkable Winx of Australia. Despite racing past many Americans' bedtimes, fans in the United States voted the winner of the 2018 Secretariat Vox Populi Award, which recognizes the horse whose popularity and racing excellence best resounded with the general public and gained recognition for thoroughbred racing. That's right, a horse that spent her entire career in Australia won an American popularity contest. Winx did not need to leave Australia to become a global legend, but today we have horses traveling from all over the world to places such as Dubai and next year to Saudi Arabia to compete for millions of dollars and establish themselves as the top thoroughbreds in the world. And just yesterday, we experienced some of the best international racing offered. The ARC is broadcast in 50 countries and attracts horses, riders, trainers, and spectators from all over the world. It's been won by horses foaled in 6 different countries. If these examples are any indication, our future as a global sport is bright. Today's panel on international racing features top trainers, owners, and breeders from Argentina, Great Britain, France, and Japan. The moderator is Rishi Prasad. Originally from Trinidad, Rishi has been a British sports TV announcer for more than 15 years and a racing fan since childhood. An international figure himself, he's covered the Dubai World Cup, the Hong Kong Invitational Meetings, Royal Ascot Champions Day, the Derby, the Breeders' Cup, and many more. Rishi, welcome.
Bonjour, good morning. I'd like to welcome up onto the stage my panel, headed by a cricket head, someone that we don't really need to introduce, but it's worth pointing out that she's the first female trainer to produce the winner of the ARC with 3 troikas. And of course, she trained the mighty Trev to 2 successes. Ladies and gentlemen, cricket head. Alongside cricket, we have Yoshi Yoshida, who is the assistant trainer for the chairman of the Japan Trainers Association, Mitsuru Hashida, and the team, of course, have produced Deirdre to become the first horse in 20 years to win a Group 1 in Britain when Deirdre won the Nassau Stakes at the Qatar Goodwood Festival. Yoshi has managed the international training and racing for the stable in the UK, Australia, Ireland, Dubai, Hong Kong, and the USA. Yoshi Hashida. And finally, I'd like to welcome Ezekiel Valla, who's the director for the Argentinian stud Adas Firmamento, a leading breeder for over 2 decades and one of the most important farms in South America. Formerly a journalist, Ezekiel spent 6 years as sales manager at the La Mission Stallion Station, and he works extremely hard to position Adas Firmamento at the top of global standards. So we would like to welcome Ezekiel Valla. And someone who we spoke to in the preparation for today, who can't be here, but kindly has given us his thoughts. Another person who needs very little introduction. In fact, yesterday he prepared Enable for an historic attempt at a 3rd victory in the ARC. John Gosden will be contributing to this morning's session. We will start with our first question for the panel about their experience of training and being associated with a globally recognized racehorse such as Trèves, Deirdre, and Abel, where there's huge interest around the world from fans and media. And we are going to start with the thoughts of Mr. Gosden.
You're lucky. You're dead lucky when horses like that turn up. And it's something that it's a bit like London buses, you know, you can get 3 or 4 at once, which you have, and then you can stand there, nothing comes along. I'm a great believer in, when trading, if a horse tries its best, and it gives of its best, and it wins at they've done it. And I respect those horses, and they're the ones I really love, the ones that try. When you get something that is amazing and goes right to the top, you're very fortunate. The staff, everyone here working appreciates it, because they know this is a bit of a moment, and you know, life is ephemeral, and everything will move on. So to that extent, I think it's always an exciting and wonderful to be around horses like that, and of course comes with it the responsibility. And I think it's great that we're getting an awful lot of fan mail, as I saw they did with Winx, and you know, and obviously you have TV stations like CNN, World Racing coming. We've had about 4 lots this week already coming and following her and following the others. It's great, because why is tennis? When people watch the tennis off, they want to see the Djokovic's and the Federers and the Nadals. And in the golf, they want to see so and so. They want to see. I will look at any sport when it's the top athletes. I'm fascinated by that. No matter what the sport is, even if it's something that I don't know a lot about, you just like to see it done at that level. So the more we can make the top horses anywhere in the world interesting around the world is really, it's a duty in a sense, more and an obligation for the industry, rather than just something to jolly along and enjoy.
Okay, Cricket, I'm going to come to you here because, of course, you have the same experience that John did with Trèves a few years ago. What was your experience like in handling her with fan interest, media interest?
Well, I agree with what John just said. It's very important to have the elite of horses, because that's what attracts the crowd and the people. So for us, it's important to open our stable, to receive anyone who wants to come and see her. That's what I did through the year I trained Trèves. And, you know, she make me look good. I make her look good. So I try to make everything up to my sport. I love racing. I'm like John. When you're a trainer, you do love racing. Of course, you train any kind of horses. If you have the chance to have horses like Trèves for me, or other that I trained before, who are at the top of a sport, it's fantastic. And you share it with everyone. You have to share it with everyone. And that's what I think racing is. It's the high level. But you need also horses of any, you know, you win a claiming race with a moderate horse, and for that horse is his arc. So you train him the same way. You don't make any difference because it's Trèves or a maiden horse or anything. You train your horses to try to make him look the best he can.
Yoshi, you have been responsible primarily for traveling Deirdre across the world in the last 12 months or so. How beneficial has it been for the sport in Japan, the fans in Japan, that she has made the journey across the world, and what has their interest been like?
Yes, it's been a great journey for us and also the Japanese fans, I believe. And we are maybe the second Japanese runner to Europe for long-term staying, following the El Condor Passer, who was second in the arc before. And at first, we are not supposed to come to Ascot. We just supposed to come back from Hong Kong after the Dubai World Cup meeting. But we are attracted by the suggestion from the Royal Ascot Racecourse. And at first, we came to Newmarket. We have no idea about training, and you know, we didn't know the direction to go to the uphill. But I just amazed how the Japanese fan following us, and also the way we are struggling, not only the race, but our life and our challenge is. And I'm also impressed how the Japanese fans following us and supporting us with seeing the movies or the photos of us by a social media or something. It always helps and encourage us. Royal Ascot, we are not that successive. We are 6, and we have the option to come back to the country. But we feel like Japanese fans following us and encourage us to keep challenging. That's why we went to the Good and we won. So it's pretty much of the. We are not alone. We are supported by Japanese fans, also the fans around the world.
Cricket, I just wanted to mention one thing that John mentioned. He said, whether it's golf or tennis, we've got superstars. We need to exploit them. Do we do that well enough?
Of course, but, well, maybe trainers, they're not used to open their stable as much as they should do. But, it will come. I mean, when you have a good horse, yes, you have to do exactly like in other sport. Make the champion shown to everyone and accept to receive people, absolutely.
Yeah. Ezekiel, maybe a thought from you on whether or not the sport does publicize its stars well enough.
Of course, we need to promote our activity, and as Cricket said, open the doors of the stables and attract people to see how we work, the things that we do. And I think that's a very good way and a very good idea to grab new owners, to keep the attention of the media and the public. So I agree with them, and I add my opinion that that's the way that we should work.
Okay, we're going to move the topic on this morning and move on to our next question for the panel. Racing festivals such as the Breeders' Cup, Royal Ascot, the Qatar Goodwood Festival, the Prix de l'Arc de Triomphe, Hong Kong, they've grown enormously and they've flourished in recent years. We wonder now how positive this has been for the sport and what has been your personal participation like in these events. And we'll begin with John Gosden once again.
It's definitely a net positive, okay? You can't remain parochial. We're here because we're here. These are the races we've always had, and this is how it is, old boy. No, sorry. The world, everything is so global, so quick now. To fight globalization is pretty hopeless. We're having trade wars at the moment. It's not going to help anyone. There's no doubt that the more, we would come in the office in the morning and time our, come in first to watch Wink's race. We just enjoyed watching her race, on a completely different time zone. So the more we come together, all the international jurisdictions, the more we dovetail together. I see that one race is being brought forward not because of the Gaelic football, but apparently because it'll link into to Hong Kong or Australia or China on TV. But the more we can blend them, the better. Of course, it's essential. And I think when meetings try and become more international, like Royal Ascot has, I think that's an absolute positive. To have a Japanese winner, even though I was second in the Nassau Stakes at Goodwood, is great. I think the more international our racing is, the more it brings the world together, let alone the world of horse racing. And the breeds to many, of course, and we're mostly racing obviously with turf horses here, so a lot of the racing in the world is on turf, so it's a natural fit. So I'm all pro it. You've got to be careful when races clash, but at the same time, the more that I've done is that to get public perception and people interested, yes. And if you go on social media, which I've never been on in my life, but my daughter keeps me up to speed on it, it is so much the people picking up from all around the world of all the international racing that we have. So it is a definite positive.
I would love to see John Gosden with a Facebook page. Yoshi, I'd love to know your thoughts. You've travelled the world this year, as we've said with Deirdre, and John referred to the fact that you beat him in the Nassau Stakes. What positives and what has your experience been like travelling the world, competing at all these major festivals?
Yes, we've been, for Japanese, the most famous race is ARC. So usually we've been to ARC many times. But this year with Deirdre, we've been witnessing many of the races in the whole season. So that we're also lucky to see the best horses in the world, not only the Deirdre. So, and it's broadcasting in Japan. So many of Japanese fans started to noticing many of the famous horses around the world. Like they've seen Baltguy's sword in the Prince of Wales, and they understand how sad they have a rainy day at the time. So they understand how the Baltguy's comes through towards the Ark. So they know the story now, and also they know the story of Deirdre. So I think the good point of staying here with our team is just not only one race, but we could make a line or stories, and we can tell this story to Japanese. That's I think the most biggest benefit we got from these experiences.
Ezekiel, as an international observer, watching all the great events that we have in the sport around the world, what do you feel the main benefits are to yourself as a breeder and to the sport as a whole?
Well, all these festivals that you have mentioned before are very positive nets, in my opinion. I can give my opinion many times as a spectator or a fan, not as a trainer like them. But also as a breeder, we have had the chance to win a Dubai Derby with Honor Devil, a horse bred by us. It was an incredible experience. It's like a dream come true. There are no words to explain these sensations. And of course, they are very important. I celebrate as well that now we have the chance to have another very important festival such as the Saudi Cup. This is very, very good for us. They are investing a lot of money. They are doing very, very well. They are promoting very well the race. Would be great if one day we have the chance at least to participate with one horse bred by us. And I'm really looking forward to attending this race because it's great. Also, another new festival is coming, like the Pigeons Cup at St. Lucia in the Caribbean. You know very well, Rishi. And all of these are very, very good festivals. And in my opinion, I really congratulate and I celebrate that we have an international racing calendar. It's so positive because you have the Breeders' Cup in November, then you have in January the Pegasus, then you have now in February the Saudi Cup, then it's coming the Dubai meeting, and it's so good because you have the chance to run on dirt and turf and the possibility to see the best horses all the world all together at the same track.
Yeah. Well,
That's
we had a lovely intro from Jim giving us an idea of the history of international competition and how it all evolved. Cricket, in your time, I remember Hatuf taking on the Breeders' Cup many years ago. How have things changed in the international competition, those festivals, in the last 2 decades or so?
I would say thank you to all the jockey club that they made possible the traveling of horses, because at the beginning, as you showed before, it was a long day. When you talk about Epina, I know well because I've trained for the Vertemin brothers. I mean, in those days, you had to take a boat. The horse was working every day. You know, they organized, they made a track in the boat to make the horse work every day because it took him 10 days or 15 days to go to America. Now, everything is possible. You fly everywhere. In every country now, they reduce quarantine and everything. So for us trainer, it's very easy to go all over the world. There's no problem anymore. Even in Australia, I went to Australia a long time ago. It was 1 month in France quarantine and 1 month in Australia. Now it's not like that. So that's made possible everyone to go everywhere. And I'm in favor of everything. So we have to say thank you to your organization because you work hard, all the jockey club, to make possible the traveling for horses, and it's much easy to go.
Well, it's a great example of what can happen when we all work together, and the fact that we can put on these great events and make life a little bit easier for all our visitors and all our guests. We'll move on and talk about attracting and retaining owners, which we know is a critical component for the sport of horse racing. So from your personal point of view, what else can racing authorities, like those that are here today, undertake to make racing enjoyable for owners? We'll hear from John Gosden.
Well, obviously, you know, a lot of our population now are very urbanized, very metropolitan, that the world of the countryside and animals is increasingly alien. I mean, a lot of people, you'd have to be back in the 1950s to remember horses and carts in the street. But of course, if you consider the internal combustion engine, the car really only got rolling in the 1920s. So to that extent, we are dealing with different worlds now. And I think you must remember that horse racing and breeding is an entertainment industry. And it therefore must be entertaining, fascinating, fun, all in equal measure. And it's a serious business. But if you lose sight of that, you lose the whole point of it. You know, as someone once said, anyone that knows one horse can run faster than the other. It's just making the whole thing and the fabric of racing, the development and the different tracks and the different levels of racing, the different age groups, distances. And I know a lot of young people are very interested, but they must be brought into it. And you can't just assume people will understand all the jargon and all the intricacies. You cannot get away from the problems of prize money, particularly in the United Kingdom and Ireland, and France facing also financial headwinds within the Premier, because the popularity of horse racing is something that when you look at the average age of people attending the races, as I'm slightly referring to earlier there, is the average age has crept up and up and up. Now, we do have a lot of young people in their 20s and 30s that like going racing in England, but it is a social event, and it has to be. And racecourses have woken up to this, and they make a huge effort, whether it be with musical concerts afterwards. But we do have to dovetail in here. We're not in the fortunate position of the likes of Hong Kong and Japan, where people just seem to come for the racing. And I think the Pacific Rim is to that extent a bright light in our industry. But I think we have to have our antenna up in all directions. You know, we trainers are aware of it, bloodstock agents and everything else, but we need to work hand in hand with the authorities and with the race courses.
Well, John referred to how well the Japanese Racing Association provide for owners. Just to give you a brief synopsis of what's involved, if you are an owner in Japan, you get publicity of fair competition and integrity rules. There's well-balanced racing program. There's very good prize money, even at a lower level of racing. There's benefits and allowance for owners. There's even orientation for new owners to show them the system, those who are unaware of it. And they have study sessions for owners as well to get feedback from them continuously. Yoshi, John has referred to it. I've labelled some of the items that are involved as positives for owners in Japan. How well have they done, in your opinion? Is there more that can be done in Japan for owners?
Oh, yes. As I've seen the Japanese racing, as we are heading to the Olympic Games, the economic situation is very much, going well. And also the more and more owners coming into the sales in Japan. And it's basically comes from the good prize money and the good coverage of many of support we can get if you become an owner in Japan. And yes, we have a feeling that we are proud of the system of JRA, and we hope to exchange opinions to other countries, and we will see in the future.
It seems that a lot of nations could perhaps learn. Ezekiel, what is it like in Argentina? What is it like in South America for owners, and particularly attracting new owners?
Well, I agree with Mr. Gosden that we have to focus on the next generations, on young people. They are going to be the next owners, the next buyers, the next breeders. So we should aim at them as a target and try to seduce them, work more with the influencer, with the social networks. They think completely different from what we used to do at their age. So we need to focus on them. And also to attract new owners, I think a very positive thing is what they do in Australia, try to promote the racing syndicates. They are, in my opinion, the best way to attract or to grab new owners.
Racing syndicate seems to be a very good way of moving things forward. Cricket, one thing that's very important, no matter what we talk about, if it doesn't pay financially, it's a very difficult thing for people to say, please come and get involved in the sport.
Of course, but that's the problem. I think for me, before it was a hobby, racing, and everything was okay. Now everybody wants to make money. And that's one thing, don't forget, the judge is the horses, okay? And the horses is the one who really, there's a winner, and there's a second, there's a third, and there's a fourth. So life has changed, that's for sure. We have to open more and more to people and take all the advantage of the new things that we've got to try to bring young people. But don't forget that whatever you do, it's still a race, okay? And the race will be a race. There's always a winner and a second and a third and the last. And people now, they really focus on just making money. And I don't think that's the right way to see racing.
Do you feel that that is something that would be easily accepted by the younger generation, which we are all calling for? They want to come get involved in the sport. We want them involved in the sport. Is that an easy thing to tell them, that it is a hobby? And
I think you have to be frank with them and not let them think that they can make money with horses. That's one point. And you have to open the training center more to people to attract them. Young people, they've got other things to do, especially in a country like France, for example. There's not only racing. In some countries where you've got lots of people on the Sundays because there's nothing else to go than to go racing. When I was young, at Longchamp, every Sunday there was 15,000 people. But those days have gone. I mean, you know, there's so many things to do that we have to be attracted, but we have to be frank to the people too. So don't make them come because then if they go, they never come back. So it's a point, it's not easy, but trainers, the point of view of a trainer in France, they have to open more to people. And it's the trainer who should bring owners. Alors, I agree that there's most things done by France Gallo because they do a lot of work, but they're not the ones who have to find owners. We are the one who should find owners, and owners between them. And it's very good now that you got all those a new way to have horses. They've built, you can be 60, 50 or less. Yeah. And that's very good for racing.
It's a very tricky balance.
It is.
Very tricky balance indeed.
Yeah, it is.
Let's move on and talk about the experience in importing and exporting bloodstock from abroad and integrating them into their respective European or South American markets in particular, and how positive this has been for your region and the greater world of racing and breeding. Ezekiel, if I could start with you, please, in your experience.
Well, I used to work at the stallion station, and we have brought great stallions to Argentina, like Giants Kosovo, Johannesburg. For us was so important. Then since I've been involved at Firmamento, I participate in the driving of stallions such as Super Saver or Master Craftman right now. So for us, it's a very, very good import of stallions, of this type of stallions. Also, we try at the farm to buy mares abroad, mainly at Keeneland and Tattersall's too, and we have had great results. They have produced very well. We have won a lot of group stakes races with mares from abroad, and I'm convinced that when you mix the European or the American bloodstock with the way that we breed horses in South America, the results are magnificent. I don't have many experience exporting horses to Europe, but yes, I do. I have some experience doing to America or Japan. Well, last week we won Group 3 with a horse bred by us, named The Great Day at Woodman in Canada. It was a great day for us. And also yesterday won an Argentinian mare Group 1 race at Keeneland for the second year in a row. So this is so important for us. And as I say, the Japan market for South America is very important. It's turning very important because all the best mares that we have there, all the group winners, go straight to Japan. All the Japanese breeders try to get the Argentina or Chilean mares because they are selling very well and they are producing very well.
Cricket, obviously, a long time ago, it seemed to be one way. Europe to the rest of the world, perhaps America to other parts of the world, South America, etc. The ratio has changed somewhat, and some more are coming back towards Europe, towards America. How good has that been for the bloodstock industry?
It's very important because if not, we're going to breed the same horse to the same mare very quickly. So we need to bring speed from the country with their speed, Australia and things like that, to stamina where we are, because we've been breeding for stamina in Europe more. So the exchange is very important.
Just you mentioned Japanese horses very briefly, so I thought I'd get Yoshi's thoughts on the spread of bloodstock. I mean, we're seeing sires like Deep Impact having an influence in Europe now, and of course they have pedigrees that go international. So how much of a joy is it for breeders in Japan to see Japanese horses succeeding internationally?
Yes, very much. We are very much enjoy the Japanese racing, but also looking forward to having more and more international related horses. And yes, we've seen the Saxon Warriors racing in Europe, and also many of the Japanese sires going out from the country. And nowadays we have a select sale. It's the biggest sale in Japan, and many of the mares come from South America, as you mentioned, and the breeders covered by Deep Impact, and they selling like millions, over millions, and many of the Japanese breeders, not the Japanese, only the Japanese breeders, but the owners and the fans understand how the black types are in around the world, and it attracts the people to curious about the world, which makes us easier to go out. So for the in the point of view, for our trainers' view, it's very good to make an international black type inside the Japanese industry, and encourage them to understand how the racings are going on.
The next topic, and we'll move on to in this particular discussion, is about horse welfare, which obviously has been debated by the industry, the general public, and many interested stakeholders. What can racing authorities do to ensure both the safety of horse and rider, but also dispel any misconceptions about our sport? Let's hear from Mr. Gosden.
Yeah, and we talk about the thoroughbred themselves. Obviously, they are bred to be racehorses. They are not necessarily, they're not designed to go pulling a cart. A lot of them can later in life become the most wonderful riding horses. We've had quite a huge number of them. Some of them can become polo ponies, for instance. A lot of them go into different racing, whether it be jumps or anything, where, over obstacles, hurdling. Many of them go and race in different parts of the world. The key thing is what happens when their racing days are over. This is what you're asking about. Fortunately now, all horses are microchipped, which makes it a whole lot easier to track them and get them on your website, get them into your system, so you can track every horse. And I think where we have to be aware is that a horse that once was doing this slips down. It really affects a great deal more the males, because they're not all going to be stallions, okay? The females with a good pedigree will normally not be an issue. They will normally be bred, and obviously on the farms for a number of years. So they're questioned when they get to a certain age, then you have to either retire them or they just graze away their days, whatever, until they become, like all of us, too old. But I do think we have to look to it. There's a lot of work being done on this now. And in the old days, people just didn't really consider it. But now I think, again, as I say, you can monitor where every horse is, and we need to set up the whole data bank on it and follow them all through. And for instance, if I see a horse that sometimes we've sold abroad, if they don't work out, I will see if I can get them back home again, because I can have another use for them here where they might not have there. But that's having good relationships with the people. It's tracking your own horses. And I think that's the responsibility of the people who breed them and own them, and then people who own them are the second owner or the third owner, as can often happen. And it is not a difficult thing with the technology we have now to be able to track them all. It's a task, but it's not an impossible task.
Cricket, do we do enough to manage the welfare of horses and riders in the sport, but also within the prism of how the public perceive it?
Well, it's very difficult because sometimes people, whatever you will tell them, they will say you're wrong or it's not that. But yes, we do a lot of things for the horses after they've been, they're racing years. We bring them, he said the filly goes to stud. Not all the filly goes to stud. Some horses. It's very difficult, but France Gallo is doing lots of things to rehab horses. We've got a rehab stud. We've got a lot of things going on now because welfare is very important. But I would like people to understand that trainer, they don't, they take a good care of their horses because they make us live. I mean, we don't want those horses to be badly handled. We handle them the best we can. They've got good boxes. They're well fed. There's no problem in the stables. So you always have people against everything, and that you won't stop it. Whatever you do, it's going to be difficult to stop people. But in France, they do a lot of things for welfare.
There's always a battle trying to prove, it seems, Ezekiel, that you're trying to prove that horses are really well looked after, the riders, the participants, whether it's horse or rider in the sport, are really well looked after. Do you think that battle is winnable? Do you think we're winning that battle?
Yes, I think so, but it depends on what we do as well. This is a very important topic for me. All of us love horses and we must have to take care of them and be aware of riders' safety too. In my opinion, most of racing accidents happen because of a previous injury not detected or hide with some medication. And we must be so strict in this point. By the way, the other day I was reading and study done by the Glasgow University and the Veterinary Service Department from San Isidro Racecourse was so useful. Who talks about in those races where horses are allowed to run with the phenylbutazone, the average of accidents or fatality was higher than in those races where this medication is prohibited. So, in my opinion, I would suggest that we should restrict or limit the use of this drug, at least in Argentinian races, because we are allowed to run with this medication at 4 years old and up. And also another important topic is that we should promote more the aftercare programs for horses because not all the mares are good enough to enter to their reproduction, and not all the horses are good enough to be stallions. So this is another important thing that we must be aware of.
Indeed, as we've been saying all along, it's a difficult balance to strike, but hopefully people will understand that within the sport a lot is being done both during and after their racing careers. Moving on, it is critical, we know, that another important element is that racing compete on a very fair and even playing field. As a participant in the sport, it'd be interesting to hear you explain why it is essential that all measures are taken to ensure both clean competition and that we have robust measures of doping control. The thoughts of John Gosden.
Look, the first thing is that it should be a level playing field. Secondly, I'm always strongly in favour of pre-race testing. I'm a great believer that if bloods are taken before a race, that is the correct and right thing, because you have this problem of what was termed milkshaking, which was so well advertised in Australia, as well as all the EPO that you've seen with the great cyclists in the Tour de France. So there's no doubt that that is important. The integrity of the sport is everything. You do have under different jurisdictions different rules. We race clean in England, Ireland and France, and I believe in Australia and Hong Kong, where in America you have a cult of medication. This is obviously more to, I think, to the track condition at Santa Anita this winter. Last winter has caused a problem, and I think there's been certain overreactions on various issues. But one thing's for sure, you cannot, in this day and age, think it is fine for horses to be intravenously injected the day of a race, the night before a race. I'm not sure that this is something that can hold. You may argue that it's therapeutic, and I think in a way, a sense it is. But there has to be strict limitations and rules coming in. And I think there's no doubt that the integrity of the sport is critically being scrutinized in this department. And I know it's a big debate in America. Here we race with no medication, and I think that is correct. We do have something called rain and soft ground, which helps horses that are a little bit achy, like athletes can get. You know, I remember doing enough athletics myself to know that the knees would play up quite a lot. But I think to that extent, it's hard to combine. I mean, even in America, the different states can't agree with one another, let alone the different two countries. But we have to bring it and pull it together as much as possible. I think there are a lot of good examples of how it's done. I think what happened at Santa Anita was an overreaction to bad track management. I've been there through many wet winters, and we didn't have any major problems. You didn't race on the turf. But I do feel that there are drainage issues, and then they started screaming at different trainers, and I'm sure there are some trainers that are sailing very close to the wind and using everything that they can, probably somewhat irresponsibly. So I'm sure there's arguments on both sides, but people need to sit down quietly and go through it and look at the way forward. And it is for the authorities to do so. We as practitioners would applaud that. And in the end, it is about the horse. What is the right thing for the horse, for the athlete, the equine athlete? And you've got to start from that position and work back. What is right for the horse? Don't let's be thinking about betting and whether they like a hard, fast track for better clock time. Don't let's think about it. Just start with the horse and work back. And so often in all these debates and racing and everything, one forgets the horse, the equine athlete himself. And that should be, once you put that as your principal grounds for every decision, you will find people can come together a lot more easily rather than worrying about their own little aspect of the industry.
Cricket, I'm going to come to you first here. I noticed you listening with real intent to what Mr. Gosden was saying. Your first observations?
Yes, there's something called drug-free, and I'm 100% in favor of drug-free, because I think you kill more horses if you give them bute or things like that. In America, it's terrible. He can say it's the track or whatever, because they have to find excuses. But if the horse doesn't feel the pain, he goes to the end. Okay? So in this country, we're drug-free, and we have to be drug-free. The trainer should be a trainer and not a chemistry. Okay? I've never used vets. I was not a great believer in vets, because I think it's so easy to put bute in a horse, but it doesn't cure your horse. Alors, today, of course, we want to make money, and everything comes back to that. For me, you have to go quick. You have to do things quick. And trainers, they should learn how to train without using any medication. Alors, it takes more time, because you have to give horses more time. But that's how it should be. We're not there to drug horses or to go to any medication with them.
If that's how it should be, then how do we get all the racing jurisdictions to be on the level playing field?
We have to work hard and try to be drug-free, and that's all. I understand when he said you should test the horses previous to the races. Absolutely, because if something goes on, it's in the morning. It's drug I use is because trainers, they've got vets who will help them to do things, and they would tell them that, I'm sorry for the vets who are here, because I don't want you to feel bad, but I think, trainers, if they don't give things to horses, they can win races. You hear all the time people say, you win races because you drug your horses. And that's nonsense. You can win a lot. I've been really someone who's been always trying to make drug-free. I've been at the head of the Trainers Association for 20 years, and I wanted all the trainers to be drug-free. But they think they have to put something in their horses. And for me, it's water and sugar. Voilà.
Voilà, indeed. Ezekiel, is it possible, is it at all possible for us to be all on the same drug-free playing field?
You should ask the vet.
Sorry, Cricket. All it's possible. It's a difficult task, but it's not impossible. I think that all the measures that we take in favor of the integrity of our activity, I agree. For example, in Argentina, we send, and South America, we send all the Group 1 races to France to be tested here, and I completely agree, and I think that is so good for the integrity of our activity. I know the Argentinian Jockey Club is doing a big effort and investing a lot of money, buying the right machines and working hard trying to get the authorization to be recognized as a laboratory authorized, and I hope they are going to get at the end of the road. But meanwhile, I think all these kind of measures are so good to show to the public perception that we are on the right way.
It's very important indeed to show that we are indeed on the right way. We have just a couple more questions in this session this morning. The penultimate question involves a rather generic one about how racing has evolved and changed during our panel's time and active years within the sport. And of course, we start with John Gosden.
It's probably changed greatly. I remember being in America in the late 60s. I was 18, I was hot walking at Belmont and Aqueduct. And there were then these wonderful stables, the Whitneys and the Mellons and Greentree and all those, and they were bred, the Phippses, the Neyroods, Tartan Farm. I could go on, Elmendorf. And there were a lot of great breeders then that were breeding to race. And they had wonderful brood mares, very strong, tough stock, sound. And similarly at that time in this country, you had a great number of owner breeders, which you still do have. But what has happened probably is that from about 1980 onwards, the sales got bigger and bigger, and the prices got bigger. And a lot of people began breeding for the sales, and you'll see people now breeding purely to sell, maybe keeping the odd one. And that's a very different creature, because when you're breeding to race, you're looking for any weakness in the breed you're trying to eliminate. But quite often what happens, I might train a filly who had a problem. Maybe she had a wind problem, maybe she wasn't sound, maybe she quite simply couldn't run. But it doesn't take long before you find them at the sales producing foals because they're related to something. And I think to that extent we have got a great deal more unsoundness in stock than we used to have. And I think breeding for the sales, so suddenly the day the yearling is sold becomes the Oaks or the Derby day, is not a healthy thing for the industry. And certainly I'm sorry to see so many of those great stables go in America and they've never been replaced, owner breeders of that stature, investing like that and keeping a tight, unique broodmare band.
Cricket, you're both with your training hat on, as well as that of a breeder. That's what John has alluded, the combination of both. You train a horse, suddenly it's not quite right, but you find it in and amongst the bloodstock industry. How do you strike up that balance?
It's quite complicated. That's why you always have to bring new bloods. Like that, horses are stronger than if you use always, the same blood. You do a lot of inbreeding, and that's weaken the horses. So as a breeder, we breed to race. But a few years ago, my dad stopped, and now we breed to sell. And as he said, the sales have changed completely everything. In France, there's very few big owners, breeders, who are breeding to race. The Wertheimer's brother, they do, and the Aga Khan and things like that, but there's less and less because it's very expensive. So I come back to my topic that I say people want to make money with horses. That's why they go to the sales.
Ezekiel, as a breeder, you're breeding to sell. Are we introducing too much precocity into the breed in some parts of the world? Do we allow horses enough time to show their true worth? What are your thoughts?
Well, in South America, we have the advantage that we breed for sale, of course, but we don't sell horses as weanling, as yearling, as a 2 years old in training. So we keep the horses and we sell just one time as a year and a half, more or less. So this is an advantage if you compare with another markets, in my opinion. And also the precocity is nowadays what all of the breeders and people and the market want. But in my opinion, at our farm, Mr. Bago, the owner of the farm, he has a different opinion, and he likes the horses with stamina, the 3 years old races, because the most important races in the world are in the long distance. The Arc, all the Melbourne Cup in Australia, I don't know, the Pellegrini in Argentina, all the best races in the world are in long distances. All of us want to run fast, and because, as cricket said, people want to get the money back soon. So that's the reason why they follow the precocity. But in my opinion, I think that we should think a little bit more in long distances.
Long distance, long term. Yoshi, you are obviously one of the younger people here today. You haven't obviously been as experienced as some other people. You have seen quite a lot of change in your time in the sport. What's been the ones that have perhaps struck you most?
I think for me, the tracking system. Because we have a horses train now, Melbourne now, Australia, and all horses are tracked. What the distance is and what length of the time they are training and the heart rate they are going up. So, and also in Japan, it's very popular now to track the horses. So sometimes I feel like some people is about to believe they can train the horse in the office.
Very funny. Yeah.
So that's because I was born in a horse family. My father is a trainer and my grandfather is a jockey and trainer. So I was always with the horses, and then sometimes I feel like the data is probably reasonable. I mean, like very much powerful to convince someone to make them train. But I feel like it's very much important to be with the horse, because horses are horses. So we cannot measure the horses.
That's my favorite quote in the morning. I think you can't train a horse in an office. The final question of this session, obviously for all members of the panel, it's quite simply, what do you see racing's future landscape to be? What are its challenges? What are its opportunities? John Gosden.
Well, we've alluded to it earlier that it is something that we need to get a generation in their 20s and 30s interested. I mean, breeding, buying or owning a horse is a very, very expensive pastime. And people don't go into it with the idea of making money. So to that extent, it is a luxury good. And our whole future is based on making our industry entertaining, fascinating, and explaining the beauty of it. The thoroughbred horse is a very beautiful creature. And I will still sometimes now, I'm not out on the heath, just suddenly see the horses on the skyline walking. Might not be my string, someone else's, with the clouds behind, like a Munnings picture. And I think, what a beautiful sight. They are lovely creatures. You put jockeys on them in their silks and colours, and you watch them race. It is aesthetically a wonderful sight. And I think a lot of the filming that is done it shows that. And I think the idea of going to a nice place, it's outdoors, you can have a nice food, lunch. We used to have dreadful food at our race courses. And you can have that whole side of it as well, and maybe watch races, obviously from another meeting, and enjoy having a bet. You're meant to be enjoying having a bet, so you go with what you're prepared to lose, not raiding the housekeeping money. And if you can make all of that worldwide, I mean, look at the people who turn up to the races in a lot of tracks. I mean, York meeting here was unbelievable. The passion, the knowledge, the people really enjoying themselves. You look at the Racing Australia, Hong Kong or anything. And I think it's, in Saratoga, where I was recently, I think there's an awful lot we can do, but we are an entertainment business, and we need to get younger people interested. So when we're all out the way, there's another generation coming through who understand the beauty of the horse and of the excitement of the competition and of the great intricacies of it. Once you start learning about the breeding, the ground, the draw, all those things, rather than making it this sort of elitist game that really is our game and nobody else should understand it, which is not the way to carry on.
Ezekiel, is that the biggest challenge, you think, facing the sport, educating people on its beauty and its intricacies and passion?
Yes, it's a huge challenge that we have. And also we should be concerned and start to deal with the animal protectionist groups as well. They are getting stronger day by day. The other day I heard that a famous singer named Taylor Swift, she had to cancel her presentation at Melbourne Cup because she has been criticized by animal protectionist group who accused her of endorsing animal abuse. So this is something that we have to be worried about it and be alert and start to work, because not only for the welfare of the animals, for the future of our industry as well. And I think that it's a very, very important challenge that we have soon.
Totally agree. That's a huge blow for the sport that happened, and hopefully it will be addressed. Yoshi, what do you feel the biggest challenge to the sport of horse racing is?
Yes, for Japanese to attract young generation is very much important for me as well. And nowadays we have lots of hobbies beside horse racing, and we are trying to attract the young generation to coming to race course, and also we are trying very hard to attract them to come to Paris, for example, to ARC. So that's usually, Japanese people work hard, so like they're taking like maybe 1 week off or 2 week, maybe 10 days off for a year. So if they come to Paris, that would be the journey of the year. So like, we have to be the top bucket list for them. So I think we are trying hard to make the better quality of race in every weekend, and hopefully they are coming to cheer us in international racing.
Cricket, the biggest challenge facing
Yeah,
the
they're
sport?
right, what they say. But I would like to involve the press a little bit, because the press, sometimes, the only thing that they would write is the accident and things like that. They should write about good story and, make our sport look good. But today, the problem, it goes so quick. People, with all the telephone and everything, news goes very quick. And it's always bad news who goes quick. Good news, you never heard of it. And I'd like the press who are over there, because I know some, that they should relate it, they should help us to make our sport look good and not give bad news of the sport. That's what I would love.
Yeah, press, where are you? Yes, all of you. Terrible, terrible people. Ladies and gentlemen, that draws to a conclusion our session. Thank you very much to John Gosden, who's contributed, Ezekiel Vala, Yoshi Hashida, and of course, Cricket Head. Thank you.
And thank you, Richie. It was not easy to build that with, and I must present my thanks to John Gosden, who gave us the time while he was preparing Enable. You gave us the time to make that interview. So now we move. We have still 2 points. We move to the presentation of the Asian Racing Conference, which will be organized in Cape Town. And I will ask the chairman of the National Horse Racing Authority of Southern Africa, Ken Truter, to come on the podium. Ken?
Good afternoon, everybody. It's wonderful to be here and to be given the opportunity to do this presentation. Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for that opportunity. As you know, we are extremely excited to be hosting the ARC Conference 2020 in Cape Town. It's been a long time since South Africa has had that honor and that pleasure. So we're particularly pleased. And before I say anything more, I'd like to show you a video of Cape Town to start off with. as they say, a picture spells out 1,000 words. And Cape Town is indeed a very beautiful city. I'm very biased. I'm born and bred Cape Townian, and I see some smiles around the room for those people who've visited Cape Town. For those of you who haven't visited Cape Town, you have to visit the conference in February. We've prepared a slideshow, some bullet points, and we can go through that now. If there's any questions, we'll be happy to ask them. I'm very pleased that I've got Dean Saranath here, who's the chairman of our LOC committee, Local Organising Committee, and he's been doing a sterling job and working very hard with fantastic support from the OFF Secretariat and Executive, so thank you to them as well. But I think if we just go through the slides, that would be good. Thank you, Dean. It's the general overview of the week, starting with the opening ceremony and ending with a stud tour, which is one of the most beautiful stud farms in Cape Town. It's about a 35-minute drive out of Cape Town. It's called Drakenstein Stud, and we have some top stallions imported from Ireland, America, that stand over there as well. These are just the various categories of bookings. You'll notice that the early bird actually expired on the 30th of September, but we've extended it by 10 days, so I think you've still got 2 or 3 days to take full advantage of that. And that's the business program, which I know, working together with OFF Secretariat, we've been doing our best to make it a very meaningful business program. I think that's at the heart of the conference, is the content, is the actual business program. And I think there are a lot of challenges facing the industry, as previous speakers have alluded to, and we're all in the same boat, and I think this is an opportunity to try and address some of these issues that we all are faced with. Okay. Got some luminaries to Master of Ceremonies, David Eades, which is fabulous that we've been able to procure his services. And these are some of the various sponsorship packages that are available. All of this is obviously on the website, so if you need more details or to study it more at length, please visit the website. We've had a good response from exhibitors. I think we've got about 40 exhibition stalls, and when last I heard, we'd already sold about 16 of the 40, so that seems to be going along very nicely. A lot of international exhibitors, which is very promising. Yeah, this is the cultural evening event. We're having it at Kirstenbosch Gardens, which is a World Heritage Site. It's set against the mountain, and it's absolutely beautiful, and there's a big African restaurant on the premises, and we're going to have a dinner and drinks, and we've got all kinds of music and all kinds of cultural interaction, so I think it's going to be a fabulous evening, and we're looking forward to it. And then on race day, which is the Saturday, we've with the cooperation and help of the racing clubs, we've actually got a fantastic race day planned. We've got old established derby for 3-year-olds. That is a Group 1 that's been moved to the day. And I think we've got another 4 group races on the day. So I think from a racing point of view, that's fabulous. It's going to be at Kenilworth Racecourse, which is one of our oldest courses. It goes back to, I've got to get this right, 1872, I think. And it's a fabulous race course, and I think it's going to be a wonderful day. And of course, this is the stud farm tour, which I mentioned earlier. So yeah, it's such a wonderful setting. This is if you can stay the extra day to attend, I would highly, highly recommend that you do. And then these are the various hotels that we've got linked to our program. The beauty about all 3 of these hotels, they are in very close proximity to the CTICC, the conference center. So most of these hotels you can walk some of them 500 meters, not 400 meters across the road, and you're there, which is very helpful indeed. And obviously, we've got the organization that's running it, Brand Gravity. They're a professional organization. They've done this before. They've done bigger numbers before. And we've decided that the best way to proceed is to use a professional organization who are experienced in this field. So they will be handling the conference. And that's it. All I can do is just end up by saying that we've budgeted for 500 delegates and 100 spouses. We're well on track at the moment. So the early bookings have been very good, so that's been pleasing. But I'd like to make an appeal to everyone here today to please support our conference and help to make it a success. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kent. So we will finish with the last presentation of this morning, last but not least, a very important one. And I will ask Prince Bandar to join as the chairman of the Jockey Club of Saudi Arabia to make the presentation. Welcome, Your Highness.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's an honor to represent horse racing in Saudi Arabia. I have just a few comments before I pass along the presentation to Paul, who most of you know here. But before I do, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Mr. Romane for the gracious time we spent yesterday. I also would like to congratulate really all of France, putting up a wonderful, wonderful event the past 2 days. That was very special for a lot of us to attend and witness. I was brought into and asked to join the Jockey Club of Saudi Arabia just over a year ago, and was given a couple of mandates, the first of which is to continue to evolve horse racing in Saudi Arabia to be at the highest international standards, with a caveat to move horse racing in the kingdom from a Part 3 country to a Part 1 country. And I remember being very naive at the time, that I thought, wonderful. By the summer, we'll be a Part 2 country. By this time next year, I'll be able to go to my superiors and say, we made it. And I've been humbled every day since then, realizing the scale of the task really ahead of us to do that. And it's very serious work that requires all of us in this industry to work together, all the stakeholders, the owners, the trainers, all the jockeys, everybody in this really very, very special sport. So it's a continuation of an evolution process. We are absolutely determined to continue to move to this goal. And I think a lot of the points that were mentioned by the previous panel, and obviously Mr. Gosden, really go to the heart of what we're trying to do here. Horse welfare is very much center of the strategy, and we cannot do it without the participation and the partnership with the owners and the trainers in this respect. And to move Saudi Arabia from this year to an environment in which absolutely no performance enhancement or medications are allowed at all. So I'm happy to report on that. I will come back with a few other comments, but I will ask my good friend Paul to continue with this presentation and give some light to obviously the event that a lot of you have heard of, which is the Saudi Cup. Paul, please.
Prince Bandar does a bit of understating every now and again, because he I first had a discussion back in the autumn of last year about the strategy for Saudi Arabian racing. And he rang me in the new year and said, I've got a new job, I've got to put this race on. But he rang me on the 2nd of January because he wanted to give me time to get into the year. He said, we really need to get going now on this whole thing. So it's quite an interesting topic in terms of what we've got to discuss. But when you think about racing in Saudi Arabia over the very long term, 1971, I come from Wales. It's a one-dimensional sports country, although some would say the one dimension, Brian Cowan would tell me the one dimension is pretty poor. But I was talking yesterday to someone at lunch, we talked about New Zealand and talking about sport. And they said, we have very few sports we compete at internationally. And they went through rugby and cricket and netball and rowing and sailing and equestrianism. And I was thinking about this today, because when you talk about Saudi Arabia, you talk about soccer, and then you're done. Until you get on to equestrianism and the remarkable history of the country over the very long term. And therefore you see that the ability of this country to be successful internationally is very limited to the idea that they managed to win a medal at the 2012 Olympics is a remarkable thing they could achieve at that time. So what you therefore establish is the history of the horse and equestrian in Saudi Arabia is in their DNA all the way through, and you have to sort of get to that as part of the process. So they have success, and this was a huge national issue. I think there's 4 things. There are 4 little graphs here. I've only got about 3 things to say, so it should be capable of being assimilated for anybody who's not listening. So the 4 things are, there's a slow increase in the number of foals, and it breeds about 2,000 horses. There's been a slow increase in the number of starters in terms of what's happening in Saudi Arabia. And slightly, you have to look at this graph carefully to realize that 630 races, and this year 635. And most importantly, the prize money, and that the average races in Saudi Arabia are about $30,000 per race. But that is an evolving structure which has happened over a long period of time. And how that has changed now is to get to a situation whereby the Saudi Cup has come along, and what does that mean for Saudi Arabian racing? The interesting point is there are 2 race caps within the control of, or the jurisdiction of Prince Bandar, in Riyadh and in Taif. And if people have been, as many of you have been to Shartin, then Riyadh is a little Shartin. Same architect, same designer, 10th of the size. So it's a little scaled down version. But it's a 2,000-meter dirt track. It's a very good dirt track, and it has all the infrastructure, but a very, very small place. So, but the facilities and the nature of the stables and what might happen there, and the quarantine and various other things are very impressive, very material, but operated not in a broader racing sense. And whether it's in terms of the horse welfare or the hospital, all those things is quite significant. But Saudi Arabia is something else. It is the only site in the Middle East that has a temperate climate that can race all year. But that hasn't been maximized in terms of what can be done. And therefore the racecourse in Taif has that potential, that ability to do that. So that gives you a very simple summary of what Saudi Arabian racing means and is like. And therefore the Saudi Cup comes along, and sometimes people think about what happens, how that might work, what does that do? Well, what that does is it drags everything along at a pace. So while the hospital wasn't necessarily in full working order, a deal's now been completed to have a hospital with a UK company and a New Zealand vet coming together to do that. And we started to see that across a number of areas in terms of what's going to happen. So the setup of the Saudi Cup will be like a smaller version of other festivals you've seen around the world, but only at a capacity of probably 10 or 12,000 people. That's the natural instinct of what can it achieve. And you can see it's a very orthogonal and organized racecourse. And in terms of our capacity planning, you start to see what might happen and how it might work over that period of time. The final thing that comes from that then, we have to go through a program, as we talked about the issue of the Breeders' Cup Classic through the Pegasus, through what might happen the 29th of February. So this just sets out the program, which has been thought about very carefully, of dirt race and then handicap, which was much discussed when it was discussed in London, and then another race on the dirt. It's the main grandstand, the nature of the infield of the dirt race, and eventually we'll come back to the setting sun. you start to see that three things: free to race, free to enter, free of medication. Those are the three things that come forward through this thing. What is really interesting to me is that all the preparations that are taking place with the Saudi Cup were going to result in the evolution of the industry. We wouldn't have been to Saratoga and launched in Saratoga, been in London, launched in Riyadh, come to this conference if it hadn't been for the Saudi Cup. And if it wasn't for the Saudi Cup, we wouldn't be seeing the transformation of the industry which Prince Bandar wants to achieve over that time. So that means in terms of horse welfare, nutrition, education, trainer skills, jockey skills, stewarding. We'll have international stewards that will be already agreed to come to look at the Saudi Cup, and that will have a transforming impact on, therefore, stewarding in Saudi Arabia over that period of time. So that's all I really wanted to say, to give you a sort of summary of what's happening and how this particular country is trying to evolve with a long-term strategy of which a significant event is material to allow it to improve over that period of time. So that was all my comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. I just would like to conclude by saying, yeah, this is a long-term project. I mean, this is not an event that we're seeking to do for 1 or 2 years. We are very much committed to horse racing and to really enhancing the global calendar when it comes to racing. I personally look forward to welcoming horses and trainers from all over the world: South America, North America, Asia, and Europe. I think we will be able to put forward an important addition to the calendar. And as Paul mentioned, this race alone has expedited significantly the transformation of the industry within the kingdom. It's exciting for the local owners, and I think it's something that we can be very, very proud of. And I really hope to welcome all of you to visit and to join us for that important race. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Highness. Thank you, Paul. So that's concluded the morning session.